Jay-Z throwing shade at Knicks president Phil Jackson during a speech to introduce LeBron as Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year on Tuesday night. In his speech, Hove referencing the term posse, which Jackson used to describe James' business associates in an interview last month with ESPN. Check this out.
We know where we come from. We do understand where we come from, and the only difference between us and someone who has the MBA from Wharton or Sloan or Berkeley or Stanford is opportunity. LeBron James has provided his friends with that opportunity, and as we witness their development, and if we're looking up at the scoreboard, very few businessmen are better than Maverick Carter, Rich Paul, Randy Mims, and all the rest of the posse behind the scenes that make it look like they're just hanging out.
Congrats to Jay-Z. Max, do you think, excuse me, congrats to LeBron. Did I just say congrats to Jay-Z?
Go ahead.
I don't know. Is Jay-Z right to call out Phil?
I don't think it's an issue of right or wrong. I mean, the idea of posse, when Phil said posse, LeBron used it really as a teaching moment about assumptions that are tied to race in his view, and it was a good moment to do that. But I don't know that Phil Jackson meant it that way. And I guess that's what challenging assumptions are. Yeah, you didn't mean it that way necessarily, but you should consider what it, you know, the message it conveys. I think Phil was using posse interchangeably with clique, crew, whatever. But still the point was well taken that LeBron made. To me, the issue is which way is the shade, you know, who's the shade being thrown at? And here it's going toward Phil. Usually, or at least back in the day when Phil had the best players in the world and was winning championships and would do his Sun Tzu thing, you know, undermine everything in the land of your enemies, the press would wind up talking to the enemies about the statement. Phil didn't have to worry about answering question after question about it because he was a master manipulator. But here, LeBron threw it right back at Phil. And who's the one who has to answer questions about it now? And which way is the shade going? It's going on Phil Jackson. He's the one who consistently gets asked questions, where people are making comments publicly like this, etc. And I think it's evidence that LeBron James, as I said last week, has outfilled Phil. This is a guy who has mastered now the psychological and emotional component of the NBA, which he didn't have earlier in his career, obviously, when he choked away the finals 4 consecutive fourth quarters, you know, in Miami against the Mavericks. But here we see him taking Steph Curry's heart. I don't know how else to say it in the finals last year. It gives me no pleasure to say that about Steph, but that's what I saw happening. Pumping up Kevin Love when he thought he needed to do that. Figuring it out with Kyrie when the moment came. And here, guys throwing shade at him. I'm going to outfill Phil Jackson. This is one of the greatest athletes you'll ever see in his glory right now, well, LeBron James.
I can respect where you're coming from, Max. I'm going to respectfully disagree. Listen, I don't think Phil Jackson is a racist or anything like that. But Isaiah Thomas alluded to racially insensitive rhetoric. I remember I brought up my man Brandon Tierney, who works for CBS. He and I have been dear friends for years. I respectfully disagree with him, just like I'm disagreeing with Max. It doesn't mean that I think they're wrong per se, and I certainly know that guys like yourselves are incredibly sensitive, particularly the things that affect my community, and I deeply appreciate that as a friend. I thank you for that. But I'm going to tell you why Phil was wrong. What Jay-Z alluded to is essentially the subliminal comments that people make that disguise and gloss over things that touch along racial lines. And that's exactly what Phil Jackson did, and I can prove it. Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan is the greatest player in my mind that ever lived. Michael Jordan is a 6-time champion. Michael Jordan also has a guy by the name of Fred Whitfield, who's an accomplished executive in this game. Rod Higgins, who's a former GM in this business, one of his tight friends. Charles Oakley, one of my brothers. These are just a few of the guys that Michael Jordan has considered friends, Worldwide West and others. I never heard Phil refer to them as a posse. I never heard Phil to refer to Shaq's crew with Uncle Jerome and Mark Stevens and the rest of the crew. I never heard him refer to them as a posse. I never heard him say anything about who Kobe Bryant hangs with. So in essence, what we're talking about is a Phil Jackson that decides to articulate an elocutive position about these individuals as it pertains to somebody who didn't play for him, who didn't deliver championships. But you made sure not to say it about those who do deliver you championships. I don't believe that's a coincidence. I don't believe that's an accident. I'm not saying it's anything racial. What I am saying is that it was clearly meant to be disrespectful, to take a dig at LeBron James. And Jay-Z taking an opportunity to articulate the position of those of us emanating from a black community is more than appropriate. Because what words did he say, Max? What words did he say, Molly? Yep. After he brought up the word posse to allude to Phil Jackson, he said, we know where we come from. Then he goes on to talk about Rich Paul, Randy Mims, Maverick Carter, and he highlighted the fact that they were accomplished. Why? Because he wanted to remind the world what LeBron was trying to say. We ain't just some dudes hanging out with each other. And oh, by the way, we rode the coattails of LeBron James. LeBron James facilitated opportunities for us so we could get to shine because the system itself doesn't lend itself towards ultimately giving us those opportunities. If anybody knows this, it's Phil. And so for Phil to say that about LeBron James, he knew what he was doing. It had nothing to do with it. May not be racial or whatever, Steve, but he knew what he was doing.
Max,
this is what I think.
Hold on, Max, 1 second before you go, because I want to add more context. Remember that when he made these comments also, he was certainly throwing shots at LeBron, because then he tried to misconstrue the scenario where he was trying to hang out with his boys. It was a Wednesday and have Thanksgiving when he was really trying to have his team over Thanksgiving. So he was
and the team playing waiting.
Yes,
right,
and all of that. So there was more to it. He was definitely trying to take shots at him.
That's Phil just bad-mouthing the opposition. That's what he does. Now, I want to
but it's wrong to, hold on, Max. It's wrong. I want to get to you. It's wrong to just
attacking
simplify
his
it like that. Come on, Max. It's more than that. It's not just going after the competition. It's not just doing that.
That's what he does. He undermines the competition sometimes by attacking their character.
Yes.
And let me tell you what I think
working right now.
Let me tell you what I think. No, it's not. That's my point. Yeah. LeBron is in control of the situation. Good for him. This is what I think Phil Jackson was guilty of. In his idea, his strategy, undermine the opposition. What tactics did he use? Well, the tactics were to point to something that he has experienced, I'm sure, in the NBA, which is when you see a player and some people that he grew up with, generally they're enablers and hangers-on, etc. And what Phil Jackson was guilty of was generalizing. When you want to make that point, you need to be specific. And Phil was not looking at the details. LeBron James doesn't have hangers-on around him. He has people to whom he has afforded opportunity, and those who have excelled given that opportunity are around LeBron James, and they're there on the merit. That's not generally the way it appears to me. Phil Jackson has seen it work. So he's guilty here of generalizing about LeBron, not paying attention to detail, and that is cousin to stereotyping.
Max, you want me to tell you what Phil Jackson is really guilty of, if we really want to just close this out? I want me to tell you what he's really guilty of? He's guilty of what a lot of black folks suspect about what white folks think of us. You're comfortable with us being the show, but you ain't comfortable with us owning it. LeBron James owns the LeBron James brand. LeBron James may be worth close to $1 billion. LeBron James and that crew of his that you call posse, and you did so in a derogatory fashion with derogatory intent, albeit probably not racial, but it might have been, we don't know.
But do you think that was Phil Jackson's motivation?
I think Phil Jackson's motivation was not as simple as you saying it's the competition.
In other words, Phil Jackson has some kind of accident.
It's not an accident that he went as far as he did. Phil Jackson's too smart for that, Max.
I'm saying, are you saying that unconsciously even Phil Jackson may have some kind of resentment about young African-American men having ownership stake?
I don't know.
It doesn't seem that way to me.
Wait a minute. I don't know that. What I do know is him bringing up the team playing and how they had to wait for LeBron, how Spoelstra needed to call. Hold on. How Spoelstra needed to call Riley, etc., leading up to his comments. Phil is too intelligent, has been around too many black folks. He knows how that would be interpreted. He didn't care. That's not an accident.
There was more to this.
I find it hard to believe he would. Okay, go ahead.
Well, just because it's hard to believe don't mean you can't believe it. It just means that it's hard. Right. But don't mean that you'll believe it.
It means it hasn't persuaded me, but I hear you.
Okay. All right.
All right. We'll leave it there. Tom Brady wasn't happy with Julian Edelman last night and let him know about it. Does Tom Brady get a pass for his actions? That debate next.
integrity and righteousness would lead them towards. Yes, please. Yes. Because
I think
you make
work for
emotional decisions.
Results.
You make emotional decisions. In this case, with the Buffalo Bills and Rex Ryan, the emotion you're feeling is panic. It's panic.
Okay.
You're playing on panic.
Hurry up, make your point, man.
This is not the success, the formula for success. Panic is not the formula. It's a process. You've learned it through Nick Saban. You've learned it now through Jason Garrett, who, by the way, took like 5-6 years of 500 ball to get the process in place. You've seen it with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Process.
Your own team.
That's the process.
Three coaches.
It's not Dak and Ezekiel. It's the process.
The process.
Go ahead. Keep talking.
Works for Philly.
Keep talking.
You're not giving the man a chance to implement his process, his culture, the way he wants to win. Nary 2 seasons does not count. And I don't want to hear about his experience with the Jets. This is about the Bills and these players and these coaches. You must give someone more time. You must see what they do when it's played out. Your 2-year emotional panic decision only ruins it for the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. You don't end up the Pittsburgh Steelers. You end up the Cleveland Browns in that scenario.
Okay, go ahead.
I needed to go here, Max. I got to either. First of all, in order for you to get at me, it's a requirement that comes with you being, for example, on First Take. To show you how lenient I am, I've actually allowed you on this show multiple times wearing that same damn shirt you're wearing right now. But I'm going to let that slide. Try a new one. Here's the deal, okay? When we talk about Rex Ryan, do you understand that Rex Ryan has not had a winning record since 2010?
How long has he been the Bills coach?
2 years, 4 years in New York. What I'm saying to you is this. This is a man that bloviates about himself and what he's going to do. This is a man that was introduced as the head coach for the Buffalo Bills and said, is the mic on? Because it's about to be on. All the stuff that y'all been going through, missing the playoffs all of these years, that's about to change. This is a man that has proven religiously over the course of a half-decade now, more than a half-decade, that he is incapable of being the overseer of an entire franchise. Can he coach defense? Absolutely. He's elite. But he has proven that he's very limited on the offensive side of the ball, that he is very limited when it comes to developing quarterbacks. And when you look at the combination of those two realities and what is required to be successful in the NFL, the fact of the matter is he's come up short. But I also call about this. Why do guys prefer to come to the NFL rather than coach colleges? Because you don't have to recruit. You got grown young men that's coming in there. They understand the responsibility that comes along with the task at hand. They embrace it. They accept it. They're well paid for it. They move forward. So ultimately, it comes down to your ability as a leader, as a steward of a franchise, to go out there and galvanize the troops and maximize their effort so you can have peak performance. This dude religiously comes up short. That's the bottom line. If you keep letting guys like him stay in their positions, no one new will ever be a head coach. That's what it comes down to, Max.
Look, what it comes down to is no matter the coaches mostly cancel each other out. Again, the bell curve. You know, here are the bad coaches. There are 3 or 4 or 5 of them by definition. Most of the others fall in the middle somewhere and tend to cancel out. You know, you're a great coach. You're in the NFL. I mean, that, of course, it's the highest league in the world for football. So you have to be great to get there, but now you're being compared to other great coaches. So among that group, where do you rank? Well, by definition, most will be in the middle, and then a few will be on the far right end, the really special coaches. Now, only a couple of teams can have those guys, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, these guys. Otherwise, you just hope to get maybe on the right side of that middle of the pack. And solid coaches with bad players will tend to be underrated. With solid teams will be about 500. And if you give them good players, really good players, Jason Garrett, they'll look really good. And I think it's pretty clear that Rex Ryan is a solid coach. He's shown that throughout his career. The Bills have solid talent, and so they're about a 500 team. But you don't jettison the coach because he's not Bill Belichick. That is what dysfunctional franchises do. As I said yesterday, as Will just brought up today, and others are, of course, thinking those are bad, dysfunctional franchises. We didn't get the exact results we want right now. Max, let's make a change. No, you stay the course.
I heard Max get into this debate with you yesterday about whether or not he is a solid coach. I'm not going to go down that path. That's your fight, Max. Mine is this: too little time. And Stephen A. falls back on the Jets and his experience with the Jets, which is virtually, not completely, virtually irrelevant to this debate.
It's not.
It's just like a financial guy who trades your stocks every 2 months. You're going to lose money. You got to see this process play out. And when it's done, maybe he's not solid, Max. Maybe he's not solid.
Let me finish the thought in this regard.
AFC Championship game.
It's not about the system. It's not about the coach. It's about the individual. And let me be the first to say, I am guilty of this. Y'all can call me whatever you want. I'm not playing. I'm a results-oriented dude. And I say that with me as well. If I ain't getting the job, my experience is that if I'm not getting the job done, I got to go. All right? If somebody else ain't getting the job done, you have to go. It's just that simple. This is not personal. This is about the NFL culture. You know how parity is. A team that stunk one year can end up being good the next. If you 6 years in the NFL, come on, Will.
I need to add something
6 years?
too.
6 years?
My issue with you is not that you're a results-oriented guy, but when you think you know what the results are. And with the Bills, don't give me 6 years. I told you, 2 years. Bills, 2 years.
Here's the other thing I want us to think about, too. Obviously, his strong suit is the defense. When he inherited this team, they had the 4th best defense.
By the way,
there can be an argument they took a step back. We just saw what Le'Veon Bell didn't do him any favors.
Molly,
225 yards.
you're not even bringing up the biggest stat.
214 yards.
You're not even bringing up the biggest
thing. He's not getting it done on the defensive side of the ball, which is his specialty.
You're right about that, Molly, but guess what, Will?
Yes.
They had 54 sacks, Doug Maroney's last year there. The very next year, Rex Ryan's first, 21 sacks.
And they actually took a step back.
You got Mario Williams. You sit up there, you got him dropping back into the secondary when he was a pass rusher. Defense is supposed to be your signature.
So that should be on lock, and that's
Come on now. Come on now.
I would not say the defense stinks.
That's the difference. That's what you and Max. Your results don't matter nearly as much as the process.
I get last word?
Go ahead.
Well, it's just this. If I'd argued that there's zero evidence that Rex Ryan should be fired, you'd be winning this debate. But I didn't argue that. I argued that 2 years in, you don't have enough.
I do.
You don't have enough.
And I'm telling you factually, I'm absolutely right. You just need to be drug tested.
And 500 is a solid coach, and he may be 8-8 this year.
You
Looks like
come
an
on this
8-8
show
team
and
to
make an
me.
argument on behalf of Rex Ryan?
Maybe 9-7, Max.
Where were you with 9-7?
Yeah, right.
Okay, we got to
Where were you with
Will,
Jeff
I want to
Fisher?
see how
You
you
should
feel
argue
next
for him.
week if you've had enough of Dak. We'll talk to you next week after the Sunday's game. Can't wait to see where you are in that Romo situation.
I'm shocked he wasn't here to argue for Jeff Fisher. Who knows with you?
What if Rex is 9-7? What if he wins out?
All right. We'll address it all next week. We'll see how it goes. Will, always good to see you. Stephen A. got his wish. Jeff Fisher fired by the Rams, but who should be his replacement? Jordan Bettis will join the desk with that answer. Also ahead, why is Jay-Z throwing shade at Phil Jackson? And what does LeBron James have to do with it? We discuss.